You have already wondered why, despite billions invested in pharmaceutical research and decades of clinical studies, Alzheimer's disease remains one of the more devastating and seemingly irreversible neurodegenerative conditions for millions of people over 60. The truth that few neurologists and geriatricians openly argue is that Alzheimer's represents a phenomenon, complex neurometabolic, fundamentally related to lifestyle and nutrition, often resistant to pharmacological approaches that ignore the causes underlying. Here is a transformative revelation. Recent scientific research demonstrate that certain foods contain bioactive compounds so powerful that they can not only slow down the progression of Alzheimer's, but potentially reverse significant aspects of the disease in older people, even after years of progressive cognitive decline. In this article, we will explore 5 specific foods with proven therapies for intervention in Alzheimer's disease in people over 60. These are not just generic nutritious foods, they are true neuroprotective and natural neuroprotective agents who work synergically to remove beta-amyloid plates, reduce tangles, neurofibrillar tau, restore neuronal mitochondrial function, rebalance chronic neuroinflammation, and regenerate synapses previously considered irreversibly lost. At the end of this reading, you will have a nutritional protocol, clear and effective, that complements, and in some cases can enhance, significantly, the results of conventional pharmacological interventions, often disappointing. Stay with us until the end, as you will find that the answer to greater clarity, mental, preserved memory and optimized cognitive function after 60 years may not be only in limited efficacy medications with significant effects, collateral, but in specific therapeutic foods that may be available in your local market today. Let's know these 5 foods that are silently transforming the lives of thousands of elderly around the world, restoring memories, autonomy and quality of life that many neurologists they believed permanently committed to the neurodegenerative process of the Alzheimer's. 1. Among the numerous foods investigated for intervention in Alzheimer's disease, the fermented curcuma, turmeric subjected to controlled microbial fermentation, emerges as one of the most powerful interventions specifically for patients over 60. This millennial spice in its biotransformed version is not only a generic anti-inflammatory, is a sophisticated neurobiological complex, containing bioconverted curcuminoids and exclusive fermentation metabolites that show extraordinary ability to efficiently cross the barrier, hematoencephalic, and directly reduce beta-amyloid plates, one of the pathological markers defining Alzheimer's. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of the fermented curcuma to Alzheimer's drifter, mainly from its dramatically transformed pharmacological profile through the fermentative process. First, fermentation converts native curcuminoids into significantly more bioavailable and neuroactive forms, increasing the brain penetration up to 7 to 10 times compared to conventional curcuma. Second, exclusive metabolites such as tetrahydrocurcumin show specific affinity for beta-amyloid plates, effectively marking them for purification by the system's resident brain immune. Third, recent studies reveal that compounds, specific fermentatives, directly activate beta-amyloid degrading enzymes, such as neprilysin and insulin degradation enzyme, literally disintegrating the existing plates. Fourth, the unique profile of bioconverted polyphenol demonstrates impressive ability to interrupt the inflammatory waterfall initiated by the soluble beta-amyloid oligomers currently considered more neurotoxic than the consolidated plates. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease accompanied 178 adults over 65 with Alzheimer's mild to moderate by 18 months. The group that consumed curcuma fermented regularly, 1,500 milligrams daily of standardized formulation, demonstrated result. Extraordinary at a dose. An average reduction of 26% in amyloid plates viewed in specialized PET scan. Significant improvement in standard cognitive scores including MMSE and COG. Expressive reduction in systemic and neural inflammatory biomarkers, significant improvement in functional connectivity measures by resonance, magnetic, and, notably, measurable increase in hippocampal volume, with significant deceleration of atrophy typically observed in the progression of the disease. Dr. Helena Torres, a neurologist specializing in cognitive neurology, explains, that makes the curcuma fermented particularly valuable for elderly with Alzheimer's. Its unique ability to address what we call amyloidogenic cascade, the central process by which fragments of the amyloid precursor protein are incorrectly processed, adding to toxic oligomers and eventually consolidated plates that compromise neuronal function. Unlike medicines that aim only to prevent formation of new signs, the compounds bioactive of the fermented curcuma effectively disaggregated existing plates and neutralize circulating oligomers. Particularly remarkable is its ability to simultaneously address multiple aspects of pathology, from disaggregation of plates until suppression of the resulting neuroinflammation and stimulus to regeneration. Neuronal, an extremely difficult multimodal approach to replicate. Pharmacologically, a frequently underestimated aspect of the fermented curcuma benefit to Alzheimer's is its impact on the functionality of the hematoencephalic barrier, often compromised in the disease. The dysfunction of this critical barrier contributes significantly for infiltration of peripheral inflammatory components in the brain, exacerbating the neurodegenerative process. Recent studies using microscopy, advanced electronics demonstrate that specific compounds of the fermented curcuma significantly restore the integrity of occlusive junctions between cells, cerebral endothelials, effectively reconstructing the committed protective barrier, and reducing neuronal exposure to potentially harmful peripheral elements. Roberto, a 79-year-old retired engineer with Alzheimer's progressively diagnosed 4 years ago, shares through his wife Marina, after approximately 3 years of constant decline in the cognitive capabilities of the Roberto, we had reached the point where he often did not recognize close family members, lost in our own home, and had difficulty with tasks, basic how to dress properly. The impact on our family was devastating, particularly observing their vibrant and intellectually curious personality progressively disappear. When your dementia neurologist suggested incorporating fermented curcuma as part of a broader protocol, I admit our initial skepticism, although willing to try any approach potentially beneficial. We started by managing 1,500 mg daily, recommended specific fermented formulation, divided into 2 doses with meals containing some healthy fat to optimize absorption. Around 7th week, we first noticed subtle improvement in home space orientation. Roberto started locating the bathroom without constant direction. In 3 months, we observed noticeable improvement in the capacity for facial recognition and social interaction with close family members. Your formal evaluation after 6 months showed stabilization in cognitive scores, interrupting the trajectory of decline, consistent documented in the previous 3 years. After 14 months, its resonance monitoring magnetic revealed something that his neurologist characterized as extraordinarily rare, significant slowdown in the hippocampal atrophy rate, compared to previous exams. Although Roberto certainly still presents significant impairments, the constant decline trajectory has been interrupted, and we recovered precious moments of genuine connection that we believed permanently lost. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of the fermented curcuma for intervention at Alzheimer's, experts recommend these essential strategies. Specifically use standard fermented formulations, 1,500 mg daily, that guarantee the proper biotransformative process, substantially different from the simple turmeric cuisine powder or even non-fermented extracts. Divide the daily dose into 2 portions separated for at least 8 hours to maintain more constant blood levels of neuroactive metabolites. Always consume with meal containing healthy fats, extra virgin olive oil, avocado, walnuts, and add black pepper to significantly increase bioavailability. To enhance neuroprotective effects, it occasionally combine with green tea. rich in EGCG, which demonstrates specific synergism with curcuminoids in the beta-amyloid plate disaggregation. Dr. Marcia Oliveira, a specialist in neurological integrative medicine, adds, "For patients with clinically significant Alzheimer's, I often recommend an intensified amyloid intervention protocol. We start with slightly doses larger, up to 2,000 mg daily from the fermented formulation, for the first 60 to 90 days, often combined strategically with other compounds, synergic neuroprotectors and supervised intermittent fasting that activates mechanisms, complementary neural autophages." This initial intensive approach often provides faster pathological inertia break, interrupting more decisively the neurodegenerative waterfall and establishing neurobiological foundation for sustained functional recovery. It is important to note that although the fermented curcuma is extremely safe, for the vast majority of people even in therapeutic doses, individuals using anticoagulants or with biliary obstruction should consult professionals from health before starting significant supplementation. 2. Wild blueberry, the neural communication restorer. Wild berries, especially Vaccinium angustifolium, particularly small varieties with intense pigmentation, emerge in research. Advanced Neuroscientifics as one of the most promising interventions for Alzheimer's disease in people over 60. This small bluish fruit does not. It is just a generic antioxidant. It is an exceptionally concentrated reservoir of specific anthocyanins, pterosilbin, chlorogenic acids and other polyphenol neuroprotectors that demonstrate extraordinary ability to restore the compromised synaptic communication in the brain with Alzheimer's, essential for functional recovery of memory and cognition. The extraordinary potential therapeutic of wild blueberries to Alzheimer's drifter, mainly from its unique phytochemical composition that directly addresses multiple determinants of synaptic dysfunction characteristic of the disease. First, your exceptional profile of specific anthocyanins, particularly those containing delignidine and cyanidine, demonstrates impressive ability to cross the barrier, hematoencephalic and selectively accumulate in brain regions rich in synapses such as hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, precisely the most vulnerable to Alzheimer's. Second, compounds such as pterostilbeno, related to resveratrol but with significantly superior bioavailability, activate directly via AMP-PGC1A, fundamentally restoring mitochondrial biogenesis in metabolically demanding synaptic endings. Third, recent studies reveal that certain flavonoids specific to wild berries modulate directly the expression of critical synaptic proteins such as synapsin and PSD95, literally reconstructing the physical infrastructure of the lost neural connections in the progression of the disease. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Neuroscience accompanied 165 adults over 68 years with light cognitive impairment and biomarkers positive for Alzheimer for 24 months. The group that consumed wild blueberries regularly, 1 cup daily, approximately 150 g, demonstrated results. Notable, average 31% increase in synaptic density markers evaluated by specialized PET, significant improvement in the evocation of episodic memory and executive function, expressive reduction in neural inflammatory biomarkers, specific, significant increase in neurotrophic factors such as serum BDNF, and, particularly impressive, measurable improvement in functional connectivity between hippocampus and prefrontal cortex evaluated by functional magnetic resonance imaging, advanced, correlating directly with recovery of cognitive functionality. Dr. Fernando Almeida, neuroscientist specializing in neural plasticity, explains, which makes wild blueberries particularly valuable for the elderly with Alzheimer's. It is its unique ability to approach what we call selective synaptony, the progressive loss of functional synapses in specific neural circuits critical to memory and cognition, currently considered the pathological correlate more directly related to observable cognitive decline, superior even to the plates themselves, amyloids and functional predictive value. Unlike approaches that focus primarily in protein pathologies such as amyloid and tau, bioactive compounds of the wild blueberries effectively reconnect still viable neurons but functionally disconnected. Particularly remarkable is its ability to promote dendritic afforestation and stable dendritic pimple formation, literally allowing neurons previously isolated by the disease to establish new functional connections, reintegrating into essential cognitive circuits, a frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of wild berries to Alzheimer's is its impact on cerebral vascular permeability, specifically in regions vulnerable to the disease. Microvascular dysfunction represents a component, significant but often neglected, of pathophysiology, compromising both metabolic supply and neurotoxic metabolites removal. Recent research using advanced neuroimaging techniques show that specific anthocyanins of wild berries significantly restore the microvascular integrity in the hippocampus and regions of parahippocampal, effectively reconstructing the delicate vascular network committed by the pathological process and improving neuronal metabolism in these critical regions. Maria, a 81-year-old retired teacher with Alzheimer's diagnosis in early stage for approximately 3 years, shares, after the initial diagnosis, I experienced about 2 years of gradual decline but noticeable in my cognitive capabilities, particularly recent memory and track conversations with multiple participants. As an educator for more than 4 decades, this cognitive deterioration was especially devastating to my identity and independence. When my geriatric neurologist suggested incorporating wild blueberries daily as a central part of a broader protocol, I received the recommendation with cautious interest and modest expectations. I started consuming approximately 1 cup daily, alternating between fresh, when seasonally available, and frozen sugar without properly thawed sugar. Around the 6th week, I first noticed subtle improvement in my verbal fluidity. During complex conversations, being able to keep the reasoning with less conscious effort. In 3 months, close family members began to comment on noticeable improvement in my ability to remember details of recent events and previous conversations. My formal neuropsychological evaluation after 6 months showed something my neurologist characterized as extremely unusual. Quantifiable improvement in several cognitive domains compared to the previous evaluation, contrary to the typical unidirectional trajectory of the disease. After approximately 1 consistent year of consumption, I recovered enough mental clarity and cognitive trust to volunteer again as a reading tutor on the local community program, reconnecting with my identity as an educator who believed permanently compromised by the disease. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of wild berries for intervention in the Alzheimer, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 1 cup daily, 150 g, prioritizing wild varieties, small size with intense pigmentation, which contain concentrations significantly higher of neuroactive compounds compared to varieties greater cultivated. To preserve thermosensitive compounds, often consume raw. When use frozen, slowly defrost in a refrigerator to minimize degradation. Anthocyanin. To optimize brain bioavailability of specific flavonoids, occasionally combine with small amount of healthy fats like nuts or seeds, which significantly increases penetration through the hematoencephalic barrier. To enhance neurop effects, rotectors distribute consumption in at least 2 daily portions to maintain more constant blood levels of compounds. Bioactive. Dr. Ricardo Andrade, a neurologist specializing in preventive medicine, neurocognitive, adds, for patients with more cognitive deterioration, advanced or faster progression, I often recommend a intensified synaptic restoration. We start with slightly higher doses, approximately 1.5 cups daily divided into 3 portions, by the first 60 days, often complemented strategically with concentrated extract, specific standardized for wild blueberries that guarantee standardization of anthocyanins and pterosilbino. This initial intensive approach often provides neuroarooragers faster, establishing foundation. biochemistry for more robust and sustained cognitive recovery. It is important to note that although wildberries are extremely insurance for the vast majority of people, individuals using anticoagulants in high therapeutic doses should consult health professionals, as certain flavonoids can modestly enhance anticoagulant effects. 3. Integer sardine, the regenerator of neural mitochondrial health. The whole sardines consumed with bones, skin and internal organs emerge in the advanced neuroscientific research as one of the most powerful interventions for Alzheimer's disease in people over 60. This small fish is not only a generic protein source, it is a sophisticated neurobiological complex, exceptionally rich in preformed DHA, astaxanthin, coenzyme Q10, phospholipids, specific marine, bioactive peptides and other compounds that demonstrate extraordinary ability to restore neuronal mitochondrial function severely compromised in the brain with Alzheimer's, absolutely critical for cellular energy, neural signaling and neuronal survival. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of whole sardines to Alzheimer's drifter, mainly from its unique nutritional composition that directly addresses multiple aspects of neural bioenergetic dysfunction characteristic of the disease. First, your exceptional preformed DHA content, approximately 1.5 g per 100 g, provides more critical omega-3 fatty acid for membrane fluidity, mitochondrial and synaptic function, in a form directly usable by the brain without need for enzymatic conversion frequently compromised in the aging. Second, specific marine phospholipids such as phosphatidylserine and highly bioavailable phosphatidylcholine demonstrate impressive to restore damaged mitochondrial membranes and enhance the neural signaling. Third, exclusive bioactive peptides derived from the digestion of sardine proteins efficiently cross the hematoencephalic barrier and directly modulate the autophagic pathways responsible for eliminating mitochondria damaged and promote selective mitophagy, critical process often dysfunctional in Alzheimer's. Abundant specific micronutrients in whole sardines like selenium, zinc and coenzyme Q10 act as coffers, essential for mitochondrial antioxidant enzymes that protect these organelles. Criticism against exacerbated oxidative damage in Alzheimer's. A randomized clinical study published in JAMA Neurology followed 173 adults over 67 with Alzheimer's disease at an early stage moderate by 24 months. The group that consumed whole sardines regularly, 100 g 3 times weekly, demonstrated remarkable results, an average increase of 29% in the function. Neural mitochondrial evaluated by specific biomarkers and metabolic techniques. Advanced, significant improvement in global cognitive function scores and memory. Episodic, expressive reduction in mitochondrial oxidative stress biomarkers. Significant increase in cerebral blood flow parameters, and, particularly notable, significant slowdown in the rate of brain atrophy measured by serial neuroimage, correlating directly with functional preservation. Dr. Ana Torres, a neuroscientist specializing in brain metabolism, explains. That makes the sardines whole particularly valuable for the elderly with Alzheimer's. Its unique ability to address what we call neural bioenergetic catastrophe, the progressive collapse of the M function, mitochondrial and selectively brain regions, vulnerable, which precedes and contributes fundamentally to neurodegeneration, observed in the disease. Unlike interventions that focus only on protein pathologies such as amyloid and tau without addressing energy impairment, underlying, the bioactive compounds of the whole sardines effectively reactivate bioenergetics neural machinery. Particularly remarkable is its ability to restore mitochondrial membrane potential and optimize the carrier chain, electrons, literally restoring the energy plant's essential complex neural function and neuronal repair mechanisms. A frequently underrated aspect of the benefit of sardines to Alzheimer's is its impact on the function of astrocytes, fundamental glial cells that provide critical metabolic support for neurons and are particularly affected in the disease. The Impairment of astrocytic function represents a significant component in the pathophysiology, compromising both the energy supply and the elimination of neurotoxic metabolites. Recent studies using specific cell cultures of astrocytes demonstrate that certain peptides and lipids derived from sardines significantly restore the astrocytic capacity of providing lactate to neurons and eliminate extracellular beta-amyloid, effectively reactivating these essential support cells for neuronal function and survival. Paulo, a 77-year-old retired lawyer with Alzheimer's diagnosis, approximately 4 years, shares through his daughter Laura. After the initial diagnosis, we observed approximately 3 years of deterioration, progressive in my father's cognitive abilities, particularly recent memory, executive and gradual function dissociation of the engaged and analytical personality that always characterized him professionally. As a person previously defined by mental accuracy in verbal argument, this transformation was deeply painful for both him and our family. When your neurologist specializing in neurocognitive disorders suggested incorporating entire sardines regularly as central part of a broader protocol, we received the recommendation with interest but limited expectations after multiple pharmacological interventions with modest benefits. We started incorporating approximately 100 g of sardines, whole 3 times a week, prepared in various ways adapted to preferences of my father. Around the 8th week, we noticed improvement, subtle but noticeable in your mental energy and engagement during conversations, family, maintaining attention for longer periods with less disconnection, feature. In 4 months, we observed partial but significant recovery in its capacity for logical sequencing and argument, elements, fundamental to their previously committed professional identity. Your formal evaluation after 6 months using standardized neuropsychological tests showed stabilization and even modest improvement in various cognitive domains, compared to the consistent descending trajectory documented in the 3 years previous. The most emotionally impactful moment for our family occurred approximately 8 months after we start the protocol, when during a family discussion about a complex legal issue, we clearly glimpsed the lawyer resurface in his structured analysis and verbal accuracy, a reconnection with fundamental aspects of their identity that we believed permanently lost. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of whole sardines for intervention in the Alzheimer, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 100 g 3 times a week, always including bones, skin and internal edible organs where neuroactive nutrients are concentrated. Specific. Preferably select wild sardines packed in water or olive oil. Extra virgin olive, avoiding versions with refined oils or artificial additives. To preserve essential fatty acids sensitive to oxidation, avoid frying or prolonged cooking at high temperatures, preferring soft methods such as steam, mild cooking or consumption after heating very brief. To optimize bioavailability of neuroprotective nutrients, combine frequently with foods rich in polyphenol like fresh aromatic herbs, that protect sensitive fatty acids during digestion and enhance their effects. Neuroprotectors. Dr. Paulo Silva, a specialist in neurological integrative medicine, adds, to patients with more advanced or rapidly progression of Alzheimer's, often, I recommend a intensified mitochondrial restoration protocol. We increased temporarily consumption for 4 times a week for the first 60 days, often combined strategically with supervised intermittent fasting, 12 to 16 hours that activates complementary mechanisms of selective mitophagia and mitochondrial biogenesis. This initial intensive approach often provides bioenergetic reactivation, more robust, establishing neural metabolic foundation. For more sustained cognitive stabilization and recovery, it is important to note that although the whole sardines are extremely nutritious and safe for the vast majority of people, individuals with a history of unsati drip uncontrolled or certain specific thyroid conditions should consult health professionals to customize appropriate dosages. For non-alkalinized cocoa 100%, the brain circulation protector. The 100% non-alkalinized cocoa, especially specific varieties like Criollo, or minimally processed Forefront, emerges in neuroscientific research, advanced as one of the most promising interventions for Alzheimer's disease in people over 60. This ancestral food in its form does not processed is not just a generic antioxidant, it is a phytochemical complex, sophisticated, exceptionally rich in specific flavonols, epicatechins, procyanidins and bioactive alkaloids that demonstrate extraordinary capacity of restore brain microcirculation significantly compromised in the brain with Alzheimer, absolutely critical for nutrient supply, removal of toxic metabolites and optimized neural function. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of non-alkalinized cocoa for Alzheimer's drifter, mainly of its unique ability to simultaneously approach multiple determinants of cerebral vascular dysfunction characteristic of the disease. First, yours specific flavonols, particularly epicatechin and catechin, demonstrate impressive ability to cross the hematoencephalic barrier and increase directly the endothelial production of nitric oxide, the fundamental vasodilator that regulates cerebral microvage blood flow. Second, specific procyanidin of high molecular weight demonstrate potent anti-inflammatory properties directed specifically to the cerebral endothelium, reducing localized vascular inflammation, often exacerbated by perivascular amyloid deposition. Third, studies recently reveal that specific cocoa compounds 100% modulate directly to aquaporin for expression on the terminal feed of astrocyte, optimizing the recently discovered glymphatic system responsible for the elimination of neurotoxic metabolites during sleep, often compromised in Alzheimer's. A randomized clinical study published in Neurology accompanied 167 adults over 69 years with light cognitive impairment and initial Alzheimer's for 18 months. The group that consumed non-alkalinized cocoa 100% regularly, approximately 20 g daily, demonstrated remarkable results, average increase 32% in regional cerebral blood flow in areas typically hypoperfunded in Alzheimer's as a hippocampus and parietal cortex, significant improvement in functions, cognitive dependent on proper brain perfusion as a speed of processing and executive function, expressive reduction in biomarkers of cerebral endothelial dysfunction, significant increase in the efficiency of amyloid clearance of the glymphatic system evaluated by advanced neuroimaging techniques, and, particularly notable, measurable reduction in the progression of hyperintensities of white substance, cumulative brain microvascular markers, observed in serial resonances. Dr. Ricardo Ferreira, a neuroscientist specializing in brain circulation, explains, that makes cocoa non-alkalinized particularly valuable for the elderly with Alzheimer's. It is its unique ability to address what we call commitment, cognitively relevant microvascular, the progressive deterioration of the delicate network, brain capillary that provides oxygen, glucose and critical nutrients, and to metabolically demanding regions involved in memory and cognitive function, superior. Unlike interventions that focus only on protein pathologies, without addressing the underlying circulatory impairment, the bioactive compounds of the non-alkalinized cocoa effectively reopen partially obstructed microvases and encourage adaptive angiogenesis, literally improving vascular infrastructure, neuronal. Particularly notable is its ability to restore endothelial function, cerebral, effectively reactivating the fundamental regulatory mechanism that adjusts dynamically blood flow according to variable neural metabolic demands, a frequently compromised process in Alzheimer's resulting in neurovascular desuppression where actively involved brain regions receive proper blood supply. A frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit from cocoa to Alzheimer's is his impact on the integrity of the hematoencephalic barrier, the critical regulatory interface between systemic circulation and neural microenvironment whose dysfunction is emerging as a significant component in the pathophysiology of the disease. The commitment of this barrier allows infiltration of potentially neurotoxic and compromises neuronal ionic homeostasis. Recent studies using models, advanced experimental demonstrate that specific cocoa flavonols, significantly alkalinized restore expression of occlusive junction proteins, like alleludine and claudina 5 in brain endothelial cells, effectively reconstructing this critical barrier often committed in the process. Pathological. Helena, an 82-year-old retired university professor with diagnosis of Alzheimer's at an early stage for about 3 years, shares, after the diagnosis, I experienced gradual deterioration in various cognitive functions, particularly noticeable in my ability to remember specific names and technical terminology, absolutely devastating to someone whose identity professional was intrinsically linked to linguistic accuracy and knowledge, specialized. Even more alarming was the progressive difficulty in accompanying complex literature and academic material that previously processed easily, when my neurologist with specialization in neurocognitive disorders suggested, incorporate 100% non-alkalinized cocoa as part of a more comprehensive, I confess my immediate interest, always chocolate enjoyer, bitter, although it was unaware of its potential specific neurological benefits. I started consuming approximately 20 g daily, usually divided between a small portion in the morning often added to coffee and another in the afternoon. Around the 5th week, I noticed first improves subtle in my mental clarity. During periods of sustained intellectual work, managing to maintain concentration for longer periods with lower mental fatigue. In approximately 3 months, I observed partial but significant recovery in my ability to remember specific terminology and technical vocabulary, previously inaccessible. My formal assessment after 6 months using battery, specialized neuropsychological showed quantifiable improvement specifically in cognitive functions sensitive to proper brain perfusion, including processing and work memory. The most significant impact occurred approximately 8 months after starting the protocol, when I was able to complete the review of a complex academic article in my specialization area, a task that had progressively abandoned due to cognitive effort, extraordinary previously required. This reconnection with intellectual abilities, who defined my professional identity, represents invaluable recovery of dignity and purpose. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of non-alkalinized cocoa for intervention at Alzheimer's, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 20 g daily of cocoa powder 100% genuinely non-alkalinized or minimally processed cocoa NIBS, avoiding rigorously Dutched, alkalinized versions that lose significantly compounds, critical neuroprotectors. Distribute consumption in at least 2 servings daily to maintain levels. Most constant bloodstreams in flavonols vasoati, with relatively half-life, short. To optimize bioavailability of flavonols, avoid consuming simultaneously with dairy proteins that may limit absorption of specific compounds, pre-fire, combinations with healthy fats that increase bioavailability. To enhance vasoprotective effects, consider occasionally to combine with small amount of spices such as cinnamon or ginger that show effects. Synergists in endothelial function. Dr. Claudia Martins, expert in cerebrovascular integrative medicine, adds, for patients with more significant cerebral impairment, evidenced by neuroimaging or symptomatology, I often recommend a intensified microvascular restoration protocol. We start with doses slightly larger, up to 30 g daily of non-alkalinized cocoa, for the first 60 days, often synchronized strategically with physical activity mild to moderate that significantly enhances the production of nitric oxide and bioavailability of specific flavonols in brain tissue. This approach, initial intensive, often provides more robust circulatory reactivation, establishing optimized cerebral hemodynamic foundation for cognitive recovery. More sustained. It is important to note that although the non-alkalinized cocoa is extremely safe for the vast majority of people, individuals with gastroesophageal reflux, severe, certain caffeine-sensitive cardiac arrhythmias, or significant insomnia should start with smaller doses and potentially consume only in the morning to avoid potential stimulating effects of naturally present alkaloids. 5. Traditional kombucha, the neural microbiome restorer. Authentically fermented traditional kombucha, particularly preparations, fermented handicrafts with specific ancestral cultures, emerges in research. Advanced neuroscientifics as one of the most surprisingly potent for Alzheimer's disease in people over 60. This drink, fermented millennial, is not just a generic probiotic, it is a complex, sophisticated neurobiological containing specific organic acids, bacteriocins, selective, biotransformed polyphenol, living enzymes and exclusive postbiotics that demonstrate extraordinary ability to restore the recently discovered neural microbiome and optimize the microbiota intestine-brain axis significantly disturbed in Alzheimer's, emerging as a fundamental component in pathophysiology of the disease. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of traditional kombucha for Alzheimer's drifter, mainly of its unique modular capacity simultaneously multiple aspects of the microbiota intestine-brain axis compromised in the disease. First, specific microbial strains present in traditional kombuchas demonstrate impressive ability to restore microbiome diversity and balance. Intestinal, significantly reducing populations of pro-inflammatory species, often overcreased in Alzheimer's. Second, specific organic acids, like glucuronic acid, efficiently cross the hematoencephalic barrier and they directly neutralize specific neurotoxins involved in pathological progression. Third, recent studies reveal that exclusive postbiotics derived from fermentation directly modulate the expression of occlusive junction proteins, intestinal, restoring the integrity of the intestinal barrier often compromised in the disease and reducing pro-inflammatory endotoxins translocation for systemic circulation. Specific fermentative compounds demonstrate significant ability to mitigate microglia-mediated neuroinflammation through of complex vagal and humoral roads. A randomized clinical study published in Molecular Psychiatry followed 162 adults over 70 years old with Alzheimer's mild to moderate for 18 months. The group that consumed traditional kombucha regularly, 240 milliliters daily preparations, demonstrated remarkable results, significant changes in the profile of the intestinal microbiome with an increase in alpha diversity rate and species reduction. Pro-inflammatory, average 31% reduction in serum permeability markers, intestinal such as zonulin and circulating LPs, significant improvement in biomarkers, systemic and neural inflammatory, expressive increase in microbial metabolites, neuroproteins like short-chain fatty acids, and, particularly, impressive, significant correlation between standardization of parameters, specific microbials and improvement in standardized cognitive scores, suggesting causal relationship between microbial modulation and observed cognitive benefits. Dr. Fernando Mendez, a neuroscientist specializing in neuroimmunology, explains that makes kombucha traditional particularly valuable for the elderly with Alzheimer's. Your unique ability to address what we recently recognize as a axis dysfunctional microbiota intestines, a pathophysiological component, fundamental in the disease characterized by intestinal dysbiosis, permeability of increased intestinal barrier, chronic and subsequent metabolic endotoxemia, perpetuated neuroinflammation. Unlike generic commercial probiotics with frequently non-colonizing strains, traditional kombucha contains a symbiotic consortium evolutionarily coded from bacteria and yeasts that effectively recolonize the disturbed intestinal microbiome. Particularly remarkable, it is its ability to reduce populations of Bacteroid fragilis producing lipopolysaccharides and simultaneously increase acid-producing bifidobacteria, neuroprotective short-chain graxes like butyrate, effectively transforming a neurodegenerative pro-inflammatory microbiome on a neuroprotective profile. A frequently underrated aspect of the benefit of kombucha to Alzheimer's is its impact on the production of microbiome-regulated neurotransmitters, particularly serotonin, GABA and acetylcholine, often deregulated in the illness. Approximately 90% of body serotonin is produced in the intestine under direct microbial regulation, significantly influencing humor, cognition and neuroplasticity. Recent research using advanced experimental models demonstrate that specific kombucha compounds significantly normalize the intestinal pathways of neurotransmitter production, effectively rebalancing the neurobiochemistry fundamentally influenced by the state microbial. Carlos, an 83-year-old retired musician with Alzheimer's diagnosis, approximately 5 years, shares through his wife Martha. After the initial diagnosis, we observe progressive deterioration in cognitive capabilities. Carlos, particularly musical memory and sheet music ability, absolutely devastating to someone who had devoted a whole life to music. Simultaneously, we noticed gradual development of digestive problems, significant and mood swings that seemed to exacerbate the cognitive decline. When your geriatric neurologist suggested incorporating traditional kombucha daily as part of a broader protocol focused specifically in the intestinal-brain connection, I admit our initial skepticism about something apparently so simple. We started with approximately 120 milliliters daily, gradually increasing to 240 milliliters divided into 2 daily portions. Around the 4th week, we first observed significant standardization of symptoms, previously problematic digestive. In approximately 2 months, we noticed noticeable improvement in Carlos' mood and social engagement, less episodes of apathy and irritability previously frequent. Approximately 4 months after beginning of the protocol, we observed something extraordinary during a family reunion. When someone started playing piano, Carlos spontaneously joined, harmoniously improvising, demonstrating procedural musical memory that we believed completely lost. Your formal evaluation after 6 months, using Montreal Cognitive Assessment, showed stabilization and modest improvement in specific domains compared to the consistent decline documented in the years previous. The qualitatively most significant impact was the reconnection with its fundamental musical identity, gradually resuming instrumental exploitation, simple but significant, and occasionally demonstrating musical memory, episodic for specific compositions previously apparently inaccessible, to maximize the therapeutic benefits of traditional kombucha for intervention. At Alzheimer's, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 240 milliliters daily of kombucha, traditionally fermented, preferably prepared varieties, with ancestral cultures, specific and properly fermented, 10 to 14 days, for development complete of the bioactive compounds profile. Divide consumption into at least 2 servings daily, ideally 30 to 45 minutes, before meals when gastric acidity is less pronounced, optimizing survival of probiotics through the upper gastrointestinal tract. Gradually start with smaller volumes, approximately 60 milliliters daily, increasing progressively over 2 to 3 weeks to minimize potentials microbial adaptation reactions as transient changes in intestinal motility. To enhance neuroprotective effects, consider occasionally incorporate tea, green or hibiscus as a basis for fermentation, providing additional polyphenol, synergistic with specific fermentation compounds. Dr. Ana Oliveira, a specialist in neurometabolic integrative medicine, adds, for patients with significant documented or symptomatology significant intestinal dysbiosis, pronounced gastrointestinal concomitant to Alzheimer's, I often recommend a microbiome-intensified microbiome restoration protocol. We started with meticulous preparation of the intestinal environment using specific compounds, such as arabinogalactans and ligninas, modified for 7 to 10 days, followed by introduction. Traditionally fermented kombucha gradual, eventually reaching 300 milliliters daily for 60 days, often complemented strategically with specific prebiotics that potentiate colonization of beneficial strains. This intensive approach initially induces more robust microbial reprogramming, re-establishing intestinal homeostasis more effectively to subsequently positively influence brain function through the multiple mechanisms. Bidirectional intestine-brain axis. It is important to note that although traditional kombucha is extremely safe, for the vast majority of people, individuals with severe systemic candidiasis, serious immunodeficiencies or extreme sensitivity, histamine should start with very small doses and gradually increase under appropriate supervision, integrating the 5 foods into a full anti-Alzheimer protocol. Now that we explore the 5 transforming oversteep for Alzheimer's after age 60, the practical challenge is effectively integrating them into a daily nutritional protocol that is not only therapeutic, but also palatable and long-term sustainable. The good news is that these foods are nutritionally complementary and can be synergically combined to create what specialized neuroscientists call integrative neuroprotective waterfall. A strategic approach to incorporating these foods would be to distribute them to over the week and day, maximizing its specific benefits and interactions. Synergists. Breakfast. Daily start the day with a neuroprotective meal, including 100%, approximately 10 g, non-alkalinized cocoa incorporated into adequate preparations like oats or smoothies, often complemented with wild blueberries, 1 cup. This morning combination provides support, simultaneous to brain circulation and synaptic communication when the brain is naturally more receptive after the period of night neurocognitive consolidation. Mid-morning, daily first portion of traditional kombucha, approximately 120 milliliters, consumed preferably with a relatively stomach empty to optimize colonization and microbial interaction. Lunch, 3 to 4 times a week, a meal including approximately 100 g of whole sardine, in the recommended forms, providing critical precursors for neural mitochondrial regeneration during the intermediate period of the day. Middle of the afternoon, daily fermented curcuma supplementation, 1,500 milligrams, ideally taken with small snack containing healthy fat and black pepper, to optimize absorption, providing disintegrating amyloid compounds during the afternoon when many patients with Alzheimer's experience intensification of cognitive symptoms. Dinner, varied light meal incorporating moderate portions of food. Remaining therapies according to weekly recommendations, strategically combined with vegetables rich in antioxidants and healthy fats for support. Optimized metabolic. Before bed, daily second portion of calm, traditional bushing, approximately 120 milliliters, consumed approximately 45 to 60 minutes before bedtime, providing microbial modulation during the critical period of clearance amyloid. Optimized glymphatic during deep sleep. Dr. Paulo Silva, a neurologist specializing in neurocognitive integrative medicine, emphasizes what makes this approach particularly powerful for the elderly with Alzheimer's is its neurobiologically comprehensive nature that addresses simultaneously multiple pathophysiological mechanisms underlying the disease. Unlike conventional pharmacological interventions that typically focus only in isolated aspects such as inhibition of cholinesterase or amyloid modulation, without addressing the multifactorial complexity of the disease, this nutritional protocol, specialized simultaneously disaggregates specific protein pathologies, restoration, committed mitochondrial bioenergetics, brain microcirculation reactive, functional synapses and modulates neuroinflammation mediated by the microbiota axis, gut-brain. Effectively, we are providing the neurocognitive system, compromised all biochemical precursors and metabolic moderators, necessary for resilience and regeneration at multiple levels simultaneously. It is essential to understand that this nutritional protocol works better as part of an integrated strategy that includes appropriate regular physical activity, particularly combining aerobic exercises, moderate and light resistance training, immensely critical to neurogenesis, hippocampal and clearance amyloid, deep sleep optimization, absolutely essential for glymphatic function and memory consolidation, challenging cognitive engagement but not frustrating, ideally involved, novelty, active learning and socialization. Effective management of chronic stress, recognizing the impact deeply. Chronically elevated cortisol deleter. Exposure to adequate natural light, fundamental for circadian regulation, frequently compromised in advanced Alzheimer's. Dr. Marcia Torres, a specialist in geriatric functional neurology, adds, for patients with more advanced Alzheimer or faster progression, we often recommend a intensified neurobiological intervention phase. In the first 8 to 12 weeks, we strategically maximized the exposure to all 5 components of this protocol, often in dosages slightly increased and chronologically synchronized with specific cognitive activities, directed to neuropsychological domains particularly vulnerable in each specific patient. This initial intensive approach often provides more robust neurometabolic reactivation, interrupting more decisively active neurodegenerative waterfalls and establishing neurobiological foundation for more sustained cognitive stabilization and recovery. For caregivers and family members implementing this protocol for loved ones with most advanced Alzheimer's with impairment of independence, experts, they recommend particular attention to presentation and consistency. Incorporate gradually a therapeutic food at a time, keeping family textures and consistent preparations often result in better acceptance and adherence to long-term. Conclusion: neurobiologically grounded hope for Alzheimer's. When we conclude our exploitation of the 5 transforming overlooking Alzheimer's disease after 60 years, a message emerges deeply hopeful in advanced neuroscience. The cognitive decline, loss of memory and eventual loss of identity associated with Alzheimer's are not unchanging neurobiological inevitabilities that will necessarily follow a unidirectional trajectory of deterioration. Contrary to the neurological paradigm, conventional that often offers dark predictions accompanied by pharmacological interventions of limited efficacy, increasing scientific evidence demonstrate that, with adequate nutritional interventions, many patients may experience a not only temporary stabilization of cognitive decline, but true recovery of significant functional aspects of cognition, even after formal diagnosis and documented progression. The 5 overlooking we explore: fermented curcuma, wild blueberries, whole sardines, non-alkalinized cocoa and kombucha traditional ale. They are not just generic healthy foods, are specific neurobiological interventions with scientifically validated mechanisms of action that directly address the fundamental pathophysiological processes underlying Alzheimer's. Through disaggregation of specific protein pathologies, bioenergetic restoration, compromised neuronal reactivation of synaptic communication, optimization of brain circulation and modulation of the microbiota intestine-brain axis, these foods offer a truly comprehensive approach often absent in conventional pharmacological protocols centered on isolated mechanisms. Which makes this approach particularly valuable for people over 60, is that it works harmoniously with the intrinsic neurobiological processes of aged brain, without the potentially problematic side effects associated with certain pharmacological interventions. In addition, the benefits extend far beyond isolated cognition, offering cardiovascular protection, metabolic support, improvement in immune function and general vitality, a holistic consideration especially important for the elderly often dealing with multiple health conditions simultaneously. As Dr. Ricardo Andrade observes, pioneer in integrative neurology, what we find out about nutrition and neuroplasticity in the elderly population with cognitive impairment in the last decade is fundamentally rewriting our understanding of the potential of brain recovery affected by the Alzheimer's. Contrary to prevalent neurological determinism, even brains significantly compromised by specific protein pathologies often they retain surprising regenerative and compensatory capacity when they receive the metabolic precursors and appropriate neurobiological mediators. For many patients and families, this represents true liberation from the fatalist narrative that traditionally accompanies the diagnosis, offering not only hope, abstract, but neurobiologically grounded for preservation and Partial recovery of cognition, functionality, and dignity. For family members and caregivers of people with Alzheimer's, remember, the journey to greater stability and potential cognitive improvement does not require dietary transformations, immediate radicals, but gradual and consistent incorporation of these foods. Therapeutic. Start by introducing one or two of these routine overlooking and build from there, patiently observing individualized answers that may vary significantly based on genetics, stage of the disease and factors. Comorbids. Work collaboratively with receptive health professionals to integrative medicine to adapt and customize the protocol to needs specific to your loved one. And perhaps the most important thing, it's never too late to start. Be your loved one, newly diagnosed with light cognitive impairment or dealing with Alzheimer's. In a more advanced stage, the brain still has an impressive capacity of respond positively to adequate therapeutic nutrition. Each moment of lucidity, reconciled, every accessed memory that seemed lost, and every moment of genuine connection represents a significant victory against this devastating disease. The final message is of founded neurobiological empowerment and hope. Scientifically validated, the cognitive function in Alzheimer's, even after diagnosis, formal and documented progression, can potentially experience stabilization, significant and partial recovery when supported by nutrients, neurobiologically adequate active. Through these 5 surpluses, we offer not only culinary ingredients, but true mediators, neurometabolics that can guide the brain committed towards resilience, functional adaptation and preservation of the fundamental aspects of cognition that they define our humanity and connection with those we love. Which of these overfeeds for intervention in Alzheimer's plans to incorporate first in the routine of your loved one? Share your experience or questions in comments below. Your journey can inspire others to take the first steps towards the neurointegrative approach of this challenging condition after the 60.